Welcome, restless dreamer. You've just stepped into the shadows of sleep, where stories whisper and the darkness listens. I'm your guide tonight, your voice in the void, here to lead you gently into nightmares wrapped in lullabies. Before we begin, press like if you're brave enough, and subscribe for more midnight tales that blur the line between sleep and terror. Tell me in the comments, where are you watching from, and what hour has found you? The first note appeared on Lily's birthday. I'll never forget the sight of it, taped to our front door with silver duct tape, as if waiting for me to see it. My daughter was turning 7 that October, and we'd only been in this house for a few weeks. Jennifer had spent the morning flipping pancakes into butterfly shapes, the smell of syrup and sugar filling the kitchen, while I went out to grab the newspaper. That's when I noticed the folded piece of notebook paper. The message was written in a sharp, blue ballpoint pen, the kind of handwriting that somehow feels hostile even though the letters are neat. Your kind doesn't belong here. Consider this your only warning. No signature, no explanation, just those 4 short sentences. My chest tightened. Jennifer laughed it off at first, suggesting it must have been left by a bored teenager or meant for the previous owners. But something about seeing it on Lily's birthday made the blood drain from my face. I tucked it into my pocket and tried to focus on the day. We had rented a bounce house for the backyard, invited half her second-grade class, and I wanted to protect that joy from whatever this was. The party was a blur of color and laughter. Kids bounced, screamed, and ran around, their faces painted like tigers and superheroes. But something, or someone, lurked at the edge of our yard. I spotted him, an older man in a faded green windbreaker standing on that narrow strip of grass between the curb and the pavement. His gray stubble and pale, watery eyes made him seem older than he was, and I swear he never blinked once while watching. I walked toward him, asking if he needed help, but he turned and left, moving in a way that seemed too deliberate to be random. That night, after the last child had gone home and the leftover pizza sat in the fridge, the house was quiet, or at least I thought it was. I was stacking the bounce house when I heard the first crunches on the gravel beside our bedroom window. Footsteps. Slow, deliberate, and spaced like someone was pacing just outside our door. I grabbed the baseball bat from the garage and went outside, but whoever it was had vanished. The motion sensor light revealed footprints leading from the gate to the window and back, men's boots with worn heels. Jennifer wanted to call the police, but what would we say? Someone walked on our gravel? They'd probably laugh it off. Then the second note arrived, slipped under the gap between the windshield and hood of my car. This one was typed. You were warned. Every day you stay is another day closer to consequences you can't imagine. We know your routines. We know when you leave for work. We know when your wife takes your daughter to gymnastics. We know which window you forget to lock. That last line made Jennifer clutch my arm until I saw the white of her knuckles. The bathroom window above the shower. The lock had been broken since we moved in. We had mentioned it to no one. Whoever had written that knew. They had been watching us. We installed cameras immediately. Wireless, 8 of them, covering every angle. While mounting one above the garage, I noticed our neighbor Dewey, the woman who had welcomed us with cookies, talking to the man in the green windbreaker. She kept glancing at our house nervously while he stood, arms in pockets, staring at me with a half smirk that made my skin crawl. That night, reviewing the footage, I saw him again at 2 a.m., at the edge of our property line, outside the camera's motion detection range. He stood there for nearly an hour, barely moving, checking his watch periodically, just watching. By the time the third note appeared, slid under our front door in red ink while we were having dinner, Jennifer couldn't hold it together. You should have asked them why. Your daughter has such pretty hair. She shouldn't walk to the bus stop alone. That line broke her. Lily had walked alone only once, the first day of school, and afterward, one of us always accompanied her. Whoever was doing this had been watching us since day one. I took time off work and started asking neighbors, but most avoided the subject. Only Paul, an elderly man 3 houses down with a rose garden, spoke up. He told me that 3 families had been driven out of this street in the past few years. Families with young children, all from out of state. A small group called themselves concerned citizens, but Paul described them as bullies who wanted the street to stay unchanged. And the man in the green windbreaker? Walter. Supposedly the worst of them. A former security guard who had been fired for being too aggressive. That night, the harassment escalated. At 2:15 a.m., the sound of shattering glass woke me. Jennifer locked herself in the bedroom, calling 911. I found our living room window smashed and a brick on the floor wrapped in another note. This time the cameras caught 2 figures fleeing through the backyard, Walter and a younger man, a shadow in a baseball cap. The police came, but Officer Brennan whispered that Walter's brother-in-law was in the department and we shouldn't expect much. Jennifer called her sister in Colorado and started packing Lily's clothes. Her fear was tangible. Bedwetting, nightmares, constant questions about the man outside. I couldn't blame her, but something inside me snapped. I wasn't going to let them drive us out. I told Jennifer and Lily to leave for a few weeks while I handled it. I installed more cameras, changed all the locks to smart locks, and even put a GPS tracker on Walter's car. Every night, he met with the same 3 people at a house 2 streets over. I documented every movement, every meeting, every drive past our house. By the 4th night alone, I watched Walter trying to jimmy open our reinforced back door at 3 a.m. Paul came over as a witness. When Walter failed, he urinated on Jennifer's vegetable garden. That's when I realized they weren't just trying to scare us. They enjoyed the power, the control, the fear they could instill without consequences. I spent the next day in the law library, poring over every harassment and conspiracy law I could find. Old newspaper archives revealed Gregory Hoffman, the owner of the house Walter met with nightly, had a history of harassment cases, settled quietly, victims too afraid to speak. Patterns emerged. Both families previously targeted were minorities. The intent was clear. That evening, I did something I never thought I would. I went public. Every video, every note, every piece of evidence uploaded online with Walter and Gregory's names, addresses, photos. I posted to the neighborhood Facebook page, Nextdoor, Twitter, and even sent it to our local news station. Within hours, it was shared tens of thousands of times. People were outraged, especially at the video of Walter attempting to break in. By morning, news vans swarmed our street, and Officer Brennan suddenly became very interested. Walter was arrested the next day, not just for us, but because 2 other families came forward. Gregory Hoffman and 2 accomplices were charged with conspiracy, harassment, and making terroristic threats. The FBI discovered a WhatsApp group where the men planned to terrorize multiple families, joking about making children cry and celebrating when people moved away. Walter's brother-in-law was suspended pending investigation. Dewey, the neighbor who had brought us cookies, finally confessed in tears. Walter had threatened her grandson, forcing her to give information about us. Jennifer and Lily returned home weeks later after all 4 men had been charged, and Walter was denied bail. The street felt different, lighter. People were talking again, organizing block parties, keeping a watchful but healthy eye on one another. Paul, our rose gardening neighbor, became like a grandfather to Lily. He passed away last year, but before he did, he told me that standing up to Walter's group was the bravest thing he had seen in years. I didn't feel brave. I just refused to let anyone make my family feel unsafe in their own home. Looking back, it wasn't complicated. Documentation, technology, and speaking up, that was enough to strip these people of their power. Sunlight, exposure, and persistence, tools anyone can wield. I sometimes think about families who never stood up, who quietly packed and left, terrorized out of their own homes. But that's not us. We stayed. We fought. We showed them that even the most organized intimidation has a weak point, one person who refuses to back down. And for us, that was enough to reclaim our home, our peace, and our lives. Even now, walking past our old front yard, seeing the traces of the rose bushes Paul planted, I remember the dread, the nights of being watched, the notes, the footsteps in gravel. But I also remember the day we finally stepped back outside, unafraid, knowing that fear doesn't get to decide where we belong. And that day, for me, became the real beginning. Not the notes, not the terror, but the fight to take back what was ours. The garage door wouldn't budge at first. I threw my weight against it again, sweat running down my temples in the June heat, while Claire unpacked boxes inside our new home. We'd just gotten the keys that morning, a fixer-upper on acres of Oregon forest, minutes from Portland, a dream escape from the cramped apartment we'd lived in for years. The property had sat empty for months after the previous owner, Frank Garrison, passed away, leaving no heirs. The bank practically begged us to take it off their hands. Everything about the house screamed project. The kitchen was outdated, the plumbing questionable, and the lawn looked like a jungle that had swallowed the driveway. But we were thrilled. Freedom at last. While Claire organized our mountain of boxes, I decided to explore the detached garage, imagining a workshop finally all my own. When the door finally groaned open, the air hit me first. A pungent mix of old oil, dust, and something else, something faintly alive. The garage was a time capsule. Pegboards with rusty tools, soggy cardboard boxes stacked haphazardly, a riding mower that could have been in a museum. My curiosity led me to the back wall, dominated by a massive industrial shelving unit holding paint cans and jars I couldn't identify. Something made me glance behind it, and that's when I saw it. A door painted the same dingy white as the walls, almost invisible, except for the padlock. Brand new, heavy duty, still shiny. Someone had installed it recently. My stomach sank. Claire came over, her brow furrowed as she examined it. We hadn't noticed this during the tour. Together, armed with a crowbar and hammer, we pried at the padlock's mounting bracket. Screws bit into the wood like claws, meant to keep anyone out. Minutes of struggle ended with a sharp crack. The door swung inward, and the smell hit harder. Not decay, not mold. Something different. Human. Unwashed. Unventilated. Lived in. Claire gagged as I fumbled for my phone flashlight. The beam cut through the darkness, revealing a small, windowless room. Concrete floor. Wooden walls. Not empty. A sleeping bag lay in the corner, still molded to the shape of a body. Cans of beans, soup, and ravioli lined makeshift shelves. A battery-powered lantern perched atop an overturned milk crate. Paperback novels stacked in humidity-warped towers. Men's clothes hung neatly from nails in the walls. A razor and toothbrush rested beside a water jug. But the notebook on the sleeping bag froze us both. Cramped handwriting, meticulously cataloging the house. When lights went on, when cars left the driveway, even Frank Garrison's heart attack in the kitchen. Dates and times written with obsessive precision. The final entry read, "New people coming tomorrow need to be ready." Claire's grip on my arm left nail marks as we stumbled out. Someone had been living here, watching, recording every detail of our lives. The notebook spanned months, beginning right after Frank's death. Through showings, inspections, even our tour, this person had been there, hiding, waiting. Claire dialed 911 while I stood guard at the garage door, half expecting someone to emerge from the trees. Minutes stretched until Deputy Briggs and her partner arrived. They photographed the room, searched the property, peered into the crawlspace, tree line, and old shed. Squatters weren't uncommon in rural properties, they said. But this was different. Organized, focused, predatory. They bagged the notebook as evidence and installed a new padlock, giving us direct contact numbers. That night, sleep was impossible. Every cricket, every branch scraping the roof sounded like footsteps. Claire suggested returning to the apartment, but we were already too invested, too deep. Then came the sound no imagination could mimic, metal scraping metal outside the garage. I grabbed the baseball bat, Claire behind me with her phone ready. The motion sensor lit the path. A figure hunched over the padlock, bolt cutters in hand. From 30 feet away, I could see the shock in his eyes when I banged on the window. Male, mid-30s, stubbled face, wide, wild eyes. He dropped the cutters and vanished into the woods like a ghost who knew every root and tree. Deputy Briggs returned, even after her shift, piecing the story together. Frank had a nephew named Tommy, criminal history, estranged, expressly left out of the will. After Frank's death, Tommy had disappeared, but clearly, he had returned, creating this hidden room. They found his makeshift camp half a mile into the forest, a tarp shelter, supplies, and dozens of photos of the house, some from moving day. Weeks of terror followed. Cameras, locks, motion sensors, and nightly patrols became routine. Every shadow, every rustle in the forest, every deer in the yard set our hearts racing. We thought perhaps Tommy had moved on, but he hadn't. Wednesday night, while reviewing footage before bed, a figure appeared at the camera's edge. Grainy image, but unmistakable. Tommy, standing in the trees, watching. For an hour, he didn't move closer, just observed before fading back into darkness. Briggs mobilized a state police search. Gas station cameras captured him purchasing supplies 2 towns over, always in cash, always partially obscured. He knew the land like the back of his hand. Logging roads, abandoned structures, escape routes. The psychological horror weighed heavier than the physical threat. He wasn't breaking in anymore. He was orbiting the property, letting fear linger, establishing dominance in his mind. Months of observation, always careful, never aggressive, until last week. Claire spotted him again at 3 a.m., attempting the garage. We were ready. Floodlights blazed. She called 911 while our neighbor, Brian, a veteran, blocked the driveway with his truck. This time, he didn't flee. Hands at his sides, he looked smaller, defeated, stripped of his confidence. When the police arrived, he went quietly. Briggs informed us he had been living in an abandoned cabin a mile away, walls plastered with photos of the house spanning Frank's ownership to ours. Tommy was now in custody, awaiting trial. We decided to sell the house. Buyers, a young family, unaware of its recent past, are taking it over. Claire found a new place closer to town. Neighbors on both sides, no hidden rooms. A sense of relief settled in, though a lingering unease remains. Some homes hold on to their ghosts, dead or alive, and the only solution is to leave them behind. Looking back, I realize the ordeal changed us. Cameras and locks can't protect you from the psychological games people play, but vigilance, preparation, and community support make a difference. Tommy's obsession had a name, a story, a path, but we survived it by staying alert and refusing to be intimidated. Driving past the old property now, the sun glinting through the trees, it looks peaceful, beautiful even. But I know better. Some spaces cling to memory, to obsession, to the people who refuse to leave, even after death. And sometimes, the only way forward is to step away, lock the doors, and never look back. We left that house, but the memory lingers. The sleeping bag, the notebook, the eyes in the trees, a reminder that freedom comes with vigilance, and that some intruders are more patient, more calculated, and far closer than you'd ever expect. I've always been drawn to old houses. Something about their creaking floorboards and musty, lived-in smell makes me feel grounded. My wife, Amanda, and I had been renting for years, scraping together money until we could finally afford something of our own. In April, we closed on a faded yellow colonial from the 1920s, 2 stories, with a sagging porch and a kitchen that looked like it hadn't been touched since the Eisenhower administration. But it had good bones, and a massive basement that promised room for all the junk we'd been storing in our cramped apartment. The previous owners, an elderly couple named the Carters, had lived there for almost 50 years before retiring to Florida. They seemed eager to sell, practically throwing the place at us for far below market value. At the time, we thought we were just lucky. It wasn't until weeks later, while I was organizing the basement under the stairs, that I noticed it. A small, crudely sealed crawlspace door, maybe 3 feet high, 4 feet wide. Whoever had closed it hadn't done so gently. Hundreds of nails hammered at impossible angles, wood gouged and splintered. Some nails bent sideways, others hammered so deep the heads had disappeared. "What the hell?" I muttered, dropping the paint can I was holding. Amanda appeared in the doorway. "What is it?" "You're not going to believe this," I said. We both stared at the door, a chill creeping up my spine. This wasn't just a forgotten storage space. Someone had panicked sealing this shut. The inspector never mentioned it. The realtor didn't either. I'd read the inspection report twice, cover to cover. Nothing. I couldn't stop myself. I grabbed a crowbar and hammer from the garage. Sweat soaked my shirt as I pulled each nail out with a screech that made my teeth ache. When the last nail gave way, a musty, sour smell hit us like a wave. Wet newspaper, dirt, something I couldn't place. Amanda shone her flashlight inside as I crouched down. The space was larger than it looked, maybe 8 feet deep, 6 wide, with a dirt floor. But it wasn't empty. Stacks of mail, yellowed with age, tied with brittle rubber bands, children's clothing, tiny sneakers, a baseball mitt. But it was the photos that made me freeze. Scattered across the dirt were dozens of pictures. At first, they looked innocent enough. Families in their kitchens, living rooms, bedrooms. But I quickly realized all of them were taken from the exact angles of our current rooms. Different families, different decades, same vantage points. Someone had been watching, obsessively, for decades. Amanda picked up a bundle of letters. The envelopes were addressed to families who had lived in our house long before us. Every envelope had been opened and resealed. Some had notes scribbled in pencil. Daughter home at 3:15, husband leaves at sharp, grocery shopping Saturdays. The worst discovery was a notebook wrapped in plastic. Amanda opened it, hands trembling. The pages were filled with detailed observations. When families showered, what TV shows they watched, arguments, even intimate moments. Dates went back decades. I wanted to slam the door shut and never speak of it again. But Amanda insisted we document everything before calling the police. We photographed the piles of mail, the children's clothes, the photos. In the back of the crawl space, I found hand-drawn sketches of the house. Every room, closet, attic crawl space measured precisely. Certain spots were marked with red X's. Corners of the master bedroom ceiling, behind the water heater, inside the kitchen pantry. Notes next to each. Good visibility. Audio clear. Check monthly. My blood ran cold. Someone had planned this. Planned to watch us. We scrambled through the house, checking the spots. Sure enough, tiny holes hidden behind paint in the master bedroom corner, the pantry, and behind the water heater. Each one lined up perfectly with the sketches. Amanda called the police while I searched the attic. That's when I found the metal box, padlock cut. Inside, more photos, this time recent. The Carters themselves, photographed without their knowledge, going about daily life. The last photo was dated just months before they sold us the house. Police arrived minutes later. 2 officers, reluctant at first, were stunned once I showed them the evidence. They called for backup. Soon the house was swarming with investigators. Detective Morrison told us they had been looking for this for years. Former residents reported missing mail, moved objects, agitated pets, but no one had concrete evidence, until now. Detective Morrison asked if we had noticed anything unusual since moving in. Amanda suddenly remembered the welcome card we had received in our mailbox days after moving in. Nothing unusual on the surface, except it complimented our new bedroom curtains, hung the night before in the second-floor bedroom. We stayed at a hotel while the police processed the house, but the next morning, an envelope appeared at the front desk. No return address. Inside, typed words, "You shouldn't have opened that door." The Carters understood the arrangement. You sleep so peacefully at 10:15 p.m. Right side. Amanda on the left. The blue coffee mug is your favorite. You missed a spot shaving yesterday below your left ear. Every nerve in my body froze. Whoever had been watching us knew everything. Our routines, our habits, even which side of the bed we slept on. The police installed cameras and new locks. I talked to neighbors, hoping for clues. Mrs. Vasquez, who had lived next door for decades, went pale when I mentioned the crawl space. She spoke of Eugene Caldwell, the house's former owner from the 1970s. A photographer, reclusive, obsessed with documenting the house. After a personal tragedy, he disappeared, and no one knew where he went. Weeks passed. Letters kept arriving, each more detailed than the last. They came to my office, Amanda's business mailbox, even my mother's house hundreds of miles away. One described a nightmare I'd only mentioned the previous morning, down to the smallest detail. The breaking point came on a Monday morning. Amanda had gone to a parent-teacher conference, and I was home, making breakfast. Footsteps upstairs. Slow, deliberate, moving from room to room. I grabbed the baseball bat and crept up the stairs. The master bedroom door was open. On the bed lay a manila envelope stamped in bold letters. Final notice. Inside, photos from the past month. Us sleeping, eating dinner. Amanda in the shower, taken from hidden holes we hadn't found yet. The last photo made my blood run ice cold. Amanda walking down an empty school hallway, photographed from inside a classroom. That afternoon, we packed what we could fit in our cars. We never went back. The house sits on the market months later. Realtors say potential buyers get a strange feeling about the place. Even now, renting across the state, I check every corner, every vent, every shadow. The police never found Eugene Caldwell, or whoever had been watching. Sometimes I wonder if it ever truly stopped. Every creak in my apartment makes me pause. Every letter left in my mailbox sends chills down my spine. And sometimes, when Amanda is out, I swear I hear the faint click of a camera shutter from somewhere inside the walls. I still remember the exact moment I thought we'd found our dream home. Ashley and I had been hunting for nearly 2 years, scrolling endless listings, attending open houses, and losing hope with every overpriced, underwhelming property. But early August changed everything. Nestled in Oakdale, Pennsylvania, was a modest 2-story colonial that seemed almost too good to be true. 2 stories, faded white siding, a large backyard, and, most importantly, well within our budget. The previous owners, the Martins, were elderly and had moved to California, leaving their son, Bradley, to handle the sale. He seemed eager to close quickly, even knocking off the asking price without us asking. Ashley was ecstatic, convinced we'd caught the perfect break in a brutal housing market. I tried not to think about it too much, focusing instead on moving boxes through the front door and imagining the memories we'd make here. The first 2 weeks were blissful. We painted, arranged furniture, and met a few neighbors at the annual block barbecue. Mrs. Crawford, a kindly woman in her 70s, brought us banana bread and mentioned, almost as an afterthought, that she'd seen lights on in the house occasionally, even when it was empty. She laughed it off, blaming her failing eyesight, but the comment lingered in my mind. Ashley and I were too busy celebrating our new beginning to worry about it. We were home. That's all that mattered. Then it started. A Saturday morning, just days after we'd moved in, I was in the kitchen making coffee when the knock came. Not a polite tap, more like someone trying to batter the door down. Ashley was upstairs in the shower. I hurried to the door and opened it to a man I didn't recognize, probably mid-40s, wearing wrinkled khakis and a polo shirt. He was holding his phone out like he was about to snap a photo and talking a mile a minute about an open house scheduled that very morning. "I'm here for the listing," he said, almost pleading. "The website says this house is available right now." I blinked, confused. "Sir, we bought this house weeks ago. There must be some mistake." His face twisted from excitement to confusion to something I can only describe as anger. He showed me his phone screen, a listing for our house on a site I'd never heard of, quickhomedeals.com. The photos were recent, our car in the driveway, our new doormat. Every detail matched what we'd just done. My chest tightened. He tried to peer past me into the house, asking if the sellers were home, if maybe I was just a house sitter. I had to physically block the doorway, telling him firmly he needed to leave. He muttered about wasting his morning and stormed off. But when I checked the website, there it was, our house, still listed. Worse, I found 3 more listings on different sites, home quick sale, cash house buyers, and now really. Each listing had slightly different photos, but all had been taken recently, some from angles that would require being inside or pressing against our windows. One showed our bedroom window from outside, and you could see Ashley's jewelry box. Another showed the blue back door we'd just painted. Ashley went pale when I showed her. She started double-checking locks while I tried contacting the websites, most of which only had forms or automated systems. Our paranoia escalated. Every passing car, every shadowed figure made our hearts race. The next morning, Sunday, it got worse. I woke around 7 a.m. to let Murphy, our dog, out. In the front yard stood a family of 4, acting as if they owned the place. The parents were measuring the driveway and asking about schools, while their teenagers poked at our windows. I had to raise my voice for them to understand. The house wasn't for sale. But the father pulled out his phone with emails from someone claiming to be Bradley Martin, the son of the former owners. The email address was slightly off, a small variation that made the scam look authentic. They'd already sent a deposit to a random account and driven hours based on fake listings. Over the next few days, it didn't stop. Monday, I called in sick from work because 7 different groups arrived before noon, each convinced they'd bought the house. A U-Haul driver showed up at 8 a.m., a young couple with an agent came at 9:30, and an older woman panicked on our lawn with her adult son, demanding refunds for deposits they'd lost. The police were called twice, but it wasn't illegal. No break-ins had occurred, just elaborate scams. Officer Russo suggested we post a house not for sale sign, as if cardboard could keep people who'd traveled hours away from a con artist at bay. By Wednesday night, fear had become our constant companion. Ashley and I hadn't slept properly since Saturday, taking turns keeping watch. Around 2 a.m., Murphy started growling that low, guttural growl only dogs give when something is truly wrong. Through the window, I saw a van parked across the street, engine running, dark windows. 2 men were at our front door, fiddling with the lock. A crowbar gleamed in one hand. I froze. Ashley whispered to the dispatcher, and I grabbed the baseball bat from the closet. I watched as one man's crowbar pried the wood and splinters flew. The pounding felt endless. My heart threatened to explode in my chest. They were actually breaking in. I screamed at them, yelling that the police were on their way and that we were armed. One of them barked back, "We paid for this house. You're trespassing." My stomach dropped. They believed it. The scam had convinced innocent buyers that they had a right to claim our home. The police arrived minutes later. It felt like hours. The intruders tried to flee but only made it to their van before the officers blocked them in. They had everything: fake deeds, counterfeit cashier's checks, fabricated contracts with forged signatures. Even repair details like our garage door sticky track, information only someone who knew the house intimately could provide, were included. Detective Milner took over our case. Over the next few days, he uncovered that the IP addresses used to post the fraudulent listings traced back to local coffee shops and libraries within a few miles of our house. Someone nearby had detailed knowledge of the property. and perhaps had been surveilling it for weeks. Ashley remembered something that explained it all. During our final walkthrough, Bradley Martin had stepped out for a long call, leaving his laptop on the kitchen counter. It was logged into email and several real estate platforms. That was all the scammer needed. Milner also discovered that the lockbox on the property had never been deactivated. Hidden behind overgrown ivy, it had allowed repeated access to take recent photos. The logs showed entries at odd hours, always when we weren't home. Someone had been inside our house, unnoticed, weeks before the attempted break-in. Days later, Bradley Martin was arrested at his Newark apartment. He had been running similar scams on 4 other properties over the past year, targeting desperate buyers with fabricated listings, fake titles, and forged contracts. In our case, he'd escalated after we bought the house, thinking he could extract more deposits from multiple people before getting caught. Investigators found thousands spread across digital payment platforms. We testified at his trial months later. Other victims included elderly people who had lost their savings, young families chasing dream homes, and investors promised impossible deals. Bradley received a lengthy sentence, but the terror lingered. We installed a full security system and changed every lock twice. But sometimes, even now, a knock at the door, early morning or late night, makes my chest tighten. Every shadow, every van slowly cruising by, triggers that gut-level panic. I check the windows obsessively and make sure all cameras are operational. Ashley and I still live in the house, our home, but nothing feels entirely safe anymore. We cannot forget how close it came to being stolen from us, how strangers with forged papers and fake deeds could believe they owned everything we worked so hard to build. Murphy, once our playful companion, now growls at every passerby, every suspicious silhouette. The experience left us hyper-aware of the hidden dangers lurking in everyday life. A house, a home, can be taken from you without warning, without breaking laws in the traditional sense. Digital deception, greed, and the illusion of legitimacy can all conspire against you. And even though the scammer was caught, the paranoia persists. Sometimes I imagine the people Bradley duped, families arriving in Oakdale, hopeful and excited, only to discover their dreams were built on lies. The level of detail, the interior photos, the emails, the fake contracts, was horrifying. Someone had spent weeks creating an alternate reality that almost became ours and Ashley's. And in that alternate reality, our lives could have been erased, our belongings stolen, our sense of safety obliterated. Even now, years later, when I walk through the house, I glance at every window, every lock, every shadowed corner. I check the lockbox, make sure cameras are recording, and triple-check the doors. The house survived Bradley Martin's schemes, but the mental scars remain. This is our home, and we will not leave. But the lesson is clear. Even when everything seems perfect, even when the market offers a bargain, trust is fragile, and danger often hides behind the ordinary. In Oakdale, in any quiet neighborhood, a dream home can quickly become a nightmare, and sometimes the nightmare only begins when you think you're safe. When we first stepped into our new house, it felt like the fresh start we had been dreaming of for years. My wife and I had scraped together every penny to escape our cramped apartment, and finally, we were here. Our own space, ours to shape and fill. The house wasn't perfect. The kitchen was half-gutted, the bathrooms were outdated, and the living room still smelled faintly of plaster dust. But we didn't care. It was ours, and that was all that mattered. We quickly realized the renovations would be a lot for just the two of us, so we decided to hire a handyman. That's when we met Mark. A neighbor had recommended him, claiming he was skilled, reliable, and friendly. At first, he seemed to live up to it. Worn jeans, boots splattered with old paint, a beat-up red toolbox. He had the kind of casual charm that made you trust him instantly. He joked as he worked, whistled along to an old radio he brought over, and made long, exhausting days feel lighter. My wife and I felt lucky. Then came the first odd moment. One afternoon after he left, I took out the trash and saw his truck parked down the street. I figured he was just stopping by a neighbor, maybe making a phone call. But when I walked past the driveway, he waved, sitting there with the engine off, a cigarette dangling from his lips. Something about that casual lingering felt wrong. It didn't take long for the strange behavior to multiply. Mark began showing up early, sometimes before either of us was dressed. He complimented the bedroom curtains no one except us had seen. He asked if we always left the back door unlocked, something he could only know if he had been inside when we weren't home. Every small detail he mentioned chipped away at the trust we had placed in him. One evening after a long day at work, I came home to find muddy boot prints on the hallway floor. My wife hadn't been home and the prints weren't ours. They led from the back door into the kitchen, stopping near the counter, as if someone had stood there, surveying the room. I confronted Mark the next morning, and he laughed. "Maybe you tracked it in without noticing," he said. But his eyes wouldn't meet mine. My stomach turned. Over the following weeks, his behavior escalated. Mark seemed to know our routines, what shows we watched, when we ordered pizza, even the route we took to work. It was impossible. There were no windows for him to see in, and we hadn't shared this information. My wife started closing blinds tight, but it didn't feel like enough. One night, she spotted him in the backyard long after he was supposed to be gone. Holding a flashlight, he smiled and said he heard a noise and wanted to check it for us. The casualness of it, the way he lingered like he owned the place, it sent chills down our spines. We decided to confront him. The next day, we told him we'd finish the renovations ourselves. He nodded, shook my hand, but didn't leave. He stood in the driveway for a long, uncomfortable moment, staring at the house as though memorizing it. That night, neither of us slept. Every creak of the old floors sounded like footsteps. Every rustle outside made us jump. Then, the breaking point came. Around midnight, our dog started barking frantically. I flipped on the porch light and saw his truck parked halfway down the alley. He was standing near the fence, motionless, just staring. I shouted, demanding to know what he was doing. He didn't respond. Slowly, he backed away, slipped into his truck, and drove off. We called the police immediately. They came, took notes, but said there was little they could do without proof. Their advice, change locks, install cameras, and call again if he returned. That night, I barely slept, sitting in the living room, watching shadows, listening for the faintest sound of movement outside. It felt like he had silently claimed our home in the moment we had handed him a key. The next morning I replaced every lock, added deadbolts, and installed a security system. My wife insisted we board up the old side gate, the one that never latched right. We warned the neighbors, gave the police a full description of his truck. For days I scanned every window, half expecting him to appear again. But strangely, after that night, he vanished. Even so, the tension didn't leave. I could still feel it, the sense of being watched, the knowledge that someone had been inside our home, privy to our routines. It gnawed at me. I double-checked locks, tightened blinds, and slept with the lights on for weeks. Every unfamiliar noise made my heart pound, and every time I glanced out the window, I half expected to see him lurking, just waiting. Weeks passed. The house gradually felt more like ours, though every corner carried a memory of him. The footprints, the lingering presence, the silent way he had observed us. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe it had been curiosity, or maybe obsession, but the unease lingered, feeding off the cracks in the old floors, the shadows in the corners. Then one evening, my wife noticed the back door unlocked. We hadn't left it that way. Panic set in. I checked the windows. All were secure, but the sense of intrusion was stronger than ever. We installed motion sensor lights around the perimeter and a few hidden cameras. My hands shook as I positioned them, trying to anticipate every angle he might exploit. Days later, the cameras caught him. Mark's truck rolled down the alley at dusk. He circled slowly, stepping out to peer over the fence, scanning the house. I froze, heart hammering. My wife grabbed my arm. We had evidence now, but the footage was chilling. He moved as though he had memorized every inch of our property, like a predator familiar with its prey. We called the police again. This time, they took the situation more seriously. Officers drove past the house at irregular hours. My wife refused to go outside alone. I walked to the mailbox in broad daylight, scanning for signs of him, every nerve taut. But still, the most unsettling moments were inside. Small, inexplicable things. Doors slightly ajar, tools moved, the faint scent of cigarette smoke in the kitchen. Then came the night that confirmed our worst fears. Around 11 p.m., the dog began growling aggressively, low and threatening. I crept to the back window and froze. There he was, Mark, crouched near the side gate, flashlight in hand, just staring. He didn't move for minutes, just studied the house. I wanted to run, to scream, but instead, I grabbed my phone and called the police, whispering the situation as my hands shook. Minutes later, his truck engine roared to life. He backed away, but before he disappeared down the alley, he lifted a hand in a slow wave, calm, deliberate, as though he knew the damage he had caused. My wife and I sat in the dark living room, frozen. That wave was not a greeting. It was a warning. We decided it was time for a final showdown. The next day, I confronted him directly. I drove to his listed address, a rundown trailer not far from ours. I knocked, announcing myself firmly as his presence had invaded our home for far too long. After a tense pause, he opened the door. He smiled, a slow, unsettling smile that made my stomach churn. "I thought you might want to finish your renovations," he said casually. I didn't answer. My fists clenched at my sides. "You've crossed the line too many times. Stay away from us. The police know. If you come near our house again, you're going to jail." His eyes glinted, unreadable. "I just like making sure everything's perfect," he murmured. That smile didn't reach his eyes. I knew then that he was capable of obsession, of doing more than just watching. But he stepped back, letting me leave. We returned home, locks changed, cameras active, lights bright. For weeks we checked every corner, every shadow, every noise. Eventually, the sense of intrusion ebbed, replaced by cautious relief. But I never forgot that feeling, being watched in my own home, knowing someone knew our routines, our habits, our vulnerabilities. Years have passed, and he's never returned. But sometimes, late at night, I catch myself staring out the window, heart racing at the faintest sound of tires or footsteps. The memory of him, of that unnerving confidence, remains. A stranger had turned our sanctuary into a place of terror, and though the house belongs to us now, the scars of his presence never fully fade. Even now, I wonder what might have happened if we hadn't noticed, if he had continued his silent observation. I imagine him standing in the shadows, studying us, waiting for the perfect moment. And I know, no matter how secure our home is, the fear he planted will always be a part of it. My name is Rachel, and a few years ago, I thought I had finally found freedom. After years of cramped apartments, my friend Hannah and I signed a lease on a sprawling old house just outside town. High ceilings, wooden floors that groaned underfoot, and corners filled with light. The kind of place that made you feel like you could breathe. The rent was absurdly low for the size, and even with the unfinished attic, we didn't care. It felt like ours. The first weeks were bliss. Hannah baked constantly, filling the air with cinnamon and chocolate, while I fussed over decorating. Friends came by just to gape at the space, and I remember sitting at the dining table one evening thinking, this is it. This is stability. The creaks of the floorboards and occasional drafts seemed like quaint quirks. Then the small things started. At first, it was trivial. Food disappearing from the fridge, a half-empty carton of milk gone, leftovers vanishing without explanation. We joked about midnight snacking, blaming each other, but it didn't stop. One night, I opened the fridge for a slice of Hannah's freshly baked pie, and it was gone. Completely gone. Hannah's confusion matched mine. That first flicker of unease took root. A few nights later, we were in the living room watching TV when I muted a commercial. From above us, slow, deliberate footsteps echoed. Not the random creaks of an old house. These had rhythm, intention. Hannah froze, her eyes wide. "Did you hear that?" she whispered. My mouth went dry. I nodded. The attic, that small locked hatch at the end of the hallway, supposedly inaccessible. But the steps above us said otherwise. We tried to rationalize it. Wind, animals. But deep down, we knew. The next morning, armed with a flashlight and a stepladder, we approached the attic. A rush of warm, dusty air hit us when we pried the hatch open. Piles of boxes, insulation, old furniture. But then, at the far corner, a crumpled blanket and a water bottle. Fresh, recently used. My heart sank. Someone had been living there, watching. We climbed down, pale and silent. Every joke about our quirky old house evaporated, replaced by fear. We locked every door and window, convinced the intruder had moved on, or so we hoped. But the disappearing food told another story. Yogurt, pie, even small crumbs left on counters, all vanished when we weren't looking. Then came the first real confrontation. I returned home earlier than usual. Hannah was still at work. Silence, except for the faint creak of a floorboard above. My chest tightened. I didn't move, afraid that a single sound would alert whoever was there. Slowly I climbed the stairs, pretending to head to my room. From the top step, I heard a soft thud from the attic. Whoever it was realized I'd come home early. I whispered into my phone, telling Hannah to get home immediately. That night we argued about what to do. She suggested it might be a desperate squatter, someone just needing a place to stay. I couldn't accept that. A stranger sneaking around while we slept was not harmless. The landlord brushed it off when we called. "The attic isn't part of the lease. Just keep it locked." His indifference made us feel powerless. Money was tight. Cameras were out of the question. So we sat, lights blazing, hearts hammering, listening to every creak, every draft, every whisper of movement above us. 2 nights later, it escalated. I woke around 3 a.m. to faint scraping sounds above the bedroom ceiling, not the usual groans of wood settling, objects being moved. I tiptoed to Hannah's room. She was awake, eyes wide, whispering that she'd been listening for an hour. Then, the attic hatch creaked open a fraction of an inch. Someone on the other side was testing the waters, checking if we were aware. I've never felt so exposed in my life. Standing there, in my own house, while someone else decided how far they could push their secret. We bolted downstairs, locking ourselves in the kitchen. Hannah dialed the police, her hands shaking. Every floorboard creak sent jolts through me. Footsteps, descending stairs, real or imagined, I didn't know. Then red and blue lights flickered through the windows. Heavy knocks at the front door. Rescue, finally. Officers swept through the house, voices echoing, flashlights cutting through shadows. Eventually, they guided us to the attic, where they found the makeshift living area we hadn't discovered. Blankets, canned food, even a small lantern. A narrow gap in the insulation revealed a hidden section, the intruder's entry point to the house. He had been moving through our home unnoticed, slipping in when we were gone, or asleep. The thought of how long, how often, made my stomach churn. The police didn't catch him that night. All they found was the half-eaten sandwich on a plate, proof he'd been there just hours before. We couldn't stay. Every shadow, every creak, every draft felt like it belonged to him. Hannah and I packed our belongings in a haze, crashing at a friend's apartment until we found another rental. Even leaving didn't erase the feeling. Years later, I still wake in the middle of the night, convinced I hear footsteps above. The attic hatch slowly creaking open. We never learned his identity. The police speculated, maybe a transient, Maybe someone familiar with the area, but nothing concrete ever came of it. The thought that he could have been observing us, our routines, our every movement, for weeks or months, sent shivers down my spine. I still remember the day we first noticed the pattern. Small, subtle things. Food disappearing. Misplaced items. A light flicking on in a room we hadn't entered. What we'd laughed off as forgetfulness or quirks of the old house were signs. Breadcrumbs leading to a truth far worse than we could imagine. Every sound in a house is normal, right? Floorboards, plumbing, wind. Yet when you know someone has been moving silently above you, the ordinary becomes terrifying. Every creak is deliberate. Every draft feels like a hand brushing across your shoulder. I can't unhear what I heard. Hannah and I learned to live with paranoia. Lights always on, doors double locked. We avoided the attic entirely, but it didn't stop the imagination. In a way, he became part of the house. That attic wasn't just a space above our heads. It was a vantage point, a silent witness to our lives. We moved again, finding a smaller, safer apartment. We laughed more easily now, cooked meals without fear of intrusion. But that attic stayed with me. I could picture it, dark and dusty, with its crumpled blanket and lantern, waiting for the next unsuspecting tenants. Sometimes, when I drive past the neighborhood, I glance at the old house. The windows look ordinary, normal, but I can't shake the feeling that it still watches, that the shadows above those walls still hold secrets, that someone, or something, still knows exactly where the creaks are, exactly how we sleep. The experience left its mark. It taught me that safety is fragile, and the familiar can be sinister. Even the house you think you own, the floors you walk on every day can harbor strangers. Not ghosts, not supernatural forces, but real people, hiding in plain sight, shaping fear into their playground. Hannah and I still talk about it sometimes, the way we whispered to each other in the kitchen, shaking, hoping the police would arrive in time. We laugh nervously, but the memory never fully fades. I've learned to listen, to notice, to respect silence, because sometimes it's not the things you can see that are dangerous. It's the ones watching from just beyond your reach. And the attic, I'll never forget it. I never imagined that buying my first house would turn into a nightmare that I couldn't escape. I had just been promoted to senior accountant at a tech startup in Ohio, and finally scraped together enough for a down payment. The housing market was brutal, and everything I liked was way out of budget, until my realtor Kevin called me about a foreclosure in Westfield, a quiet suburb about 20 minutes from downtown. The house itself was a 3-bedroom, single-story ranch with hardwood floors and a backyard bordered by thick hedges that promised privacy. It wasn't glamorous, but it was solid. I remember walking through for the first time, imagining how I'd transform it. The peeling wallpaper and outdated kitchen didn't bother me. I'd spent years in cramped apartments. This was freedom. The first weeks were a dream. I spent evenings sanding floors, painting walls, uncovering the original hardwood under old carpeting. My co-worker Nathan helped me install new light fixtures one weekend, and my sister drove up from Cincinnati to help tame the garden, tangled with wild morning glories. At night, exhausted, I'd listen to the house settle around me, learning its creaks and sighs. Neighbors were polite. The Washingtons next door brought cookies and congratulated me on finally fixing the house. They spoke briefly about Diane Hutcherson, the woman who had lost it in foreclosure after her husband passed. Apparently, the eviction hadn't been peaceful. The sheriff had physically removed her while she screamed. But that was months ago, they assured me. I had bigger things on my mind. Stripping wallpaper, choosing paint, making this house mine. I even found odd remnants of Diane's life. Expired coupons in a shoebox, a wedding dress hanging forgotten in the master closet. I donated the dress and thought little more of it. That is, until the first Thursday in December. I was heating up leftover Chinese food when I noticed movement outside through the kitchen window. A figure stood at the end of my driveway, a woman, long coat hanging loose over pajamas, just standing there. The street was empty. No car passed. She didn't move for what felt like eternity. Finally, she turned and walked away. I told myself it was nothing, some random passerby, but the next night, she was back. Same spot, same coat. Longer this time, nearly 10 minutes. The streetlight briefly illuminated her face, hollow cheeks, stringy gray-blonde hair, eyes that seemed to pierce right through me. I froze. Memories of the Washington story came back. Diane. I pulled up her name online and found old photos. Smiling, heavier, once happy. The face was unmistakable. Saturday night changed everything. I was watching Netflix when it began. Not a knock, not a tap, but pounding. My front door rattled violently, the frame quivering under the force of her fists. Her voice cut through the walls, raw, desperate. "This is my house. You can't just take someone's house." I crept to the window, peeking through the blinds. Diane stood on my porch, coat swinging over what looked like pajamas and rubber boots. Spittle flew from her mouth as she screamed, "I know you're in there. Get out of my house. Robert built that deck for me, planted those roses for me." My hands shook as I dialed 911. The dispatcher kept me on the line while she pounded on the door, alternating threats and sobs. "I'll make you leave. You'll see. This is theft. Grand theft. My husband died in this house." Minutes stretched like hours before the police arrived. Diane had shifted from pounding to kicking, leaving black boot marks on the freshly painted door. Surprisingly, the officers knew her by name. "Come on, Diane. We've talked about this," one said gently as they escorted her away. She glanced back at me through the back window, expression hollow, calculating like she was memorizing my face. The older officer explained that Diane had been staying with her sister, but kept coming back. "She has mental health issues," he said lightly. "Lost her job after her husband passed. Medication lapses. Sister's trying to help. I filed for a restraining order immediately, but sleep didn't come easy. Every shadow, every creak in the house made me jump. Then the destruction began. Garden gnomes smashed across the patio, roses pulled from the earth and left in disturbing patterns. She didn't stay hidden anymore. She'd wait near the mailbox, holding a camping lantern, swaying it back and forth like a demented lighthouse keeper. Sometimes she sang, a twisted version of "This Little Light of Mine" turned into "This Little House of Mine," over and over. I installed motion sensor lights that turned the yard into a stadium at the slightest movement, bought blackout curtains, and started sleeping in the back bedroom, baseball bat at hand. But nothing could stop her. She was relentless. Thursday morning, I found every single rose pulled from the ground, arranged in a circle on the lawn, their heads pointing toward the house. By Friday night, things escalated. I woke to scratching above me, not at the door, but on the roof. She had climbed up there, muttering, occasionally letting out broken, eerie laughs. I barricaded myself in the bathroom. Brutus, my newly adopted German shepherd, growling at the sound. Through the vent, I could hear her. "Robert always said we should have fixed these shingles. Years old, these shingles. I told him we needed new ones before the rain came." The pounding grew violent, her crowbar striking the attic vent. By the time the police arrived, she had attempted to pry it open, carrying a floral tote with a hammer and a box of her deceased husband's ashes. They arrested her on criminal trespass, attempted breaking and entering, and violation of the restraining order. As they dragged her down, she continued speaking to the house, clutching the ashes, insisting she needed to spread them in the attic where Robert had built a craft room. Her sister Eleanor appeared the next morning, exhausted, tearful, holding cookies as a peace offering. "She can't accept he's gone," Eleanor whispered. "She thinks if she can just get back in the house, Robert will be there. She can't accept it's over." I wanted to scream at the destroyed roses, the sleepless nights, the PTSD that had started creeping into my life, but all I felt was hollow sympathy. Diane was gone, institutionalized in a facility in Indiana. I paid to replant new roses, yellow ones like she'd wanted, and watered them diligently every Thursday, almost as a tribute to her grief and a reminder of the chaos that had once consumed my life. Weeks later, Eleanor called me frantic. Diane had escaped, stolen a car, and was untraceable. I drove to the house to find her kneeling in the backyard where the roses had been, digging a hole with her bare hands, dirt caked under her nails, ashes spilling from the box in her lap. Her eyes were vacant, staring through me as if I didn't exist. "Robert wants different roses," she said calmly. "Yellow ones this time." Red made the house angry. I didn't call the police immediately. Something about her ritual, the mixture of grief, insanity, and devotion, rooted me to the patio. I watched as she planted the ashes with a meticulous tenderness, patting the soil gently, whispering promises about how the garden would bloom. "Remember when Timothy was 5 and helped plant the tomatoes? He ate more than he planted," she murmured. A memory of a child, once alive in this home, pierced through the madness. Timothy, now grown and likely estranged. I wondered what had happened to the family, how they had fallen from a life of backyard tomatoes and birthdays to this. The police eventually arrived. Diane didn't resist. She simply asked to finish planting one last rose. They allowed it, and she patted the soil one final time. As they led her away, she looked back and said, "Water them every Thursday." Robert always watered on Thursdays. I've kept that routine, watering the yellow roses every Thursday, a strange ritual that tethers me to the house's past. Brutus sleeps at my feet now, always alert. The house feels less like something I conquered and more like something I borrow. The roses grow wild and untamed, reclaiming their space. I occasionally check on Timothy via social media. He lives in Seattle now, silent about the past, estranged from his mother. Yet the memory of Diane, her obsession, her grief, lingers. Sometimes when Brutus barks at nothing, I wonder if it truly is nothing, or if the house still remembers the lives lived within it, the Sunday dinners, the birthdays, the little boy laughing as he ate raw tomatoes from the garden. I kept the house, despite the trauma. Selling it would have felt like stealing it twice, and sometimes, late at night, I think Diane found a way to stay, even if her mind fractured. The yellow roses thrive in proof that the past can linger, survive, and reach across years, a haunting presence that is both beautiful and terrifying. The day I got the keys to my first house should have been the happiest day of my life. No more cramped apartments, no more creaking floors or paper-thin walls. This little 2-bedroom ranch in suburban Michigan was mine. Faded blue siding, leaning mailbox, and a yard that desperately needed work. Standing in the empty living room that August afternoon, I imagined placing my couch, my desk, my life finally unpacked. The neighborhood was quiet. Kids still rode bikes in the street, and most of the houses looked well loved. The realtor had warned me about interesting neighbors, but I assumed that was code for a few old-timers who liked to complain about anything. I spent the first week moving boxes, hammering picture hooks, and trying to make the place feel like home. Then, I decided to do what any neighborly person would do: introduce myself. The house on my left belonged to the Andersons, a sweet elderly couple who brought me a casserole and a nearly hour-long monologue about their grandchildren. But the house on my right, that was where things got weird. Overgrown bushes almost blocked the windows, and the grass looked like it hadn't been cut in months. When I knocked on the door, it took forever for anyone to answer. Finally, a man opened it. He looked like he'd been asleep in those clothes for days. Jeans stained with unknown substances, a white undershirt that had seen better years. He introduced himself as Gerald. The way he looked at me, it wasn't hostile exactly, but it was intense. His gaze pinned me in place, memorizing every detail of my face like he was storing it in his memory. "Thanks for the beer," he said, taking the 6-pack I brought. "So, what's your schedule?" You work from home? There was a subtle hunger in his eyes when I mentioned my graphic design job. I forced a smile, handed him the beer, and quickly backed away, feeling an odd chill crawl up my spine. He kept leaning toward my driveway as if he were measuring it, cataloging it for some private file. I tried to shake it off. Maybe Gerald was just socially awkward. Maybe I was being paranoid. But that night, while carrying boxes inside around 9 p.m., I caught him at his kitchen window, lights off, just standing there, staring at me. No movement, no pretense. The strange occurrences began small, things I could rationalize if I tried. Broken watch by my steps, an old baseball cap hung neatly on my fence, a single work glove in the middle of the driveway. I convinced myself the wind had blown them over from Gerald's yard. But soon, I noticed a pattern. Whenever I stepped outside, he appeared. Checking mail, he was suddenly watering his plants. Grilling dinner, he was standing by his shed, pretending to organize tools while glancing at me. Even the neighbors noticed. Mrs. Anderson pulled me aside one afternoon, her face tight with concern, asking if everything was okay. I got the sense she knew more than she was saying. Weeks in, things escalated. One morning at 3 a.m., I woke to a flashlight beam bouncing across my bedroom ceiling. Gerald crouched in my backyard, shining it directly into my window. When I confronted him, he gave an absurd explanation about a raccoon under the deck. His calm, rehearsed voice didn't fit the early hour or the circumstances. I warned him to stay off my property, and he simply smiled, that empty, unreadable smile, and returned to his house. I installed motion sensor lights and double-checked locks, but the feeling of being watched never left. Then came the objects, personalized, intended to disturb. A Google Street View print of my house dated before I moved in, left under my windshield wiper. A hardware store receipt for rope, zip ties, and duct tape left on my walkway. A dead sparrow, perfectly positioned on my welcome mat, wings spread like it had been posed. That was the final straw. I called the police. They didn't take it seriously. Officer Coleman was polite but clearly annoyed, suggesting cameras and better locks. So I did. But Gerald seemed to know every blind spot. Every morning brought a new gift, each more unsettling than the last. Then came the pounding, heavy rhythmic slams on the front door late one Friday night. I froze, heart hammering. Peering through the peephole, I saw nothing. But the footsteps running away through the grass left no doubt. He was testing me, reminding me he was there, watching, always watching. Sleep became a joke. Couch, bat at hand, phone ready. Coffee and energy drinks were my sustenance. Mistakes piled at work. Anxiety consumed me. My sister in Arizona told me to move, but I had invested everything in this house. Letting Gerald win was unthinkable. Then came Wednesday night. I had finally managed to fall asleep in my bed when glass shattered downstairs. Not the door pounding, not a prank. Real, dangerous breaking glass. My adrenaline spiked. Bat in one hand, phone in the other. I crept toward the sound. Gerald was in my kitchen, shirtless, sweat-streaked, hammer in hand, standing as if waiting for me to arrive. His face was streaked with tears and snot, yet emotionless. He began to speak in a monotone about rules and how I'd ruined everything by moving in. The previous owner, he said, understood the arrangement. Now I had to leave or face consequences. I kept him talking, inching toward my phone. His hammer rose slowly, almost ceremoniously. My instincts kicked in. Swinging the bat as hard as I could, it connected with his arm with a sickening crack. He screamed, but instead of retreating, he lunged at me, toppling over the kitchen table. His strength was shocking, hands wrapping around my throat while the broken arm hung uselessly at his side. The operator's voice from my phone was a faint thread of sanity. I kneed him in the stomach, breaking his grip, and scrambled for the back door. He slipped on broken glass, face first, with a wet crunching sound that made me gag. By the time the police arrived, he was conscious but immobilized, moaning amidst shards of glass. Gerald's history came out quickly. Previous restraining orders, an involuntary psychiatric hold, and a notebook documenting every detail of my life, what I ate, when I turned off lights, my routines down to the hour. The old owner, Douglas, had been feeding Gerald and letting him use his garage, believing he was helping a troubled man. Gerald, however, had spiraled into obsession. The prosecutors found detailed sketches of my house, including notes about entry points and teaching proper respect. I couldn't stay in that house. Every shadow, every sound, every slow car past the window set my nerves ablaze. Friends' couches became my refuge. My therapist called it PTSD, but it felt like survival. A month later, I sold the house at a loss, disclosing the incidents to potential buyers. Even after moving into a secure apartment with cameras and a doorman, Gerald's presence lingered. I still own that baseball bat, keeping it beside my bed. It's heavy, tangible proof that I survived, that I fought back. Sometimes I drive by the old neighborhood. His house looks the same, yellow paint peeling, dark windows. But I know the truth. Some people don't let go. Some shadows follow you, long after the doors are locked. Even now, years later, I occasionally Google Gerald's name. Alerts notify me if there's news. I know he's still out there somewhere, possibly remembering every inch of that house, every weak spot, every moment he almost succeeded. I sleep better than I did back then, but part of me will never fully leave that kitchen, never fully escape the neighbor's shadow.